A scandal in the sense that one of these days a lawsuit really ought to be brought by the wife or mother, especially a Funtown kid or a girl at St. Mary's or a prisoner at Moundsville, because a prisoner is a helpless person and he should not be subjected to less than full quality care. And it is now not a decent quality hospital. In other words, unless you said to the main surgeons here in Fairmont, would you allow your wife to go over there to have surgery done or to, be hospitalized? Unless their answer is yes, I would just as soon as go to Fairmont General, then you shouldn't do it to a helpless person, you see? And for that reason, one of these days, I think we're going to have a funny situation. The state's going to spend about $2 million building that big building that's going to have to then be converted for $2 more million into a nursing home, because somebody's going to win a lawsuit that a prisoner has rights to, you follow me, from Moundsville or anywhere, not to be subjected to an unqualified surgeon, or where there's no anesthesia, or where there's not a good x-ray unit, and there's nothing over there, okay, that's worthwhile. Now, I don't have anything but compassion for the people on each side who have feelings that they deserve part of the action. The rest of my talk will deal with their feelings as with country people's feelings towards the establishment here. And I understand all those issues. So I'm now going to talk about the hospital they don't like. Many of them like Fairmont Emergency because it's warm, because it's human, and they don't understand quality issues, and all. And they understand it's theirs. It's at least on each side, and it's 68 beds, and it's got about 80 jobs, okay? And these are understandable issues. So there's really then one accredited hospital here, and its name is Fairmont General Hospital. Now, everything's got an owner. Every place has an owner. Who owns Fairmont General Hospital? Let's talk about who owns it. First, who owns it? Legally owns it. Who is the legal owner of Fairmont? Anybody?
The city?
Yeah. The city of Fairmont. Now, we clear on that? There isn't anyone going to argue with what we're going to say about these facts. When you want to argue, tell me, okay? But I try not to mislead you when I tell you facts. I've warned you when I'm giving you my, devil's advocate, or I'm just goading you, or, giving you opinions or prejudices. The city of Fairmont owns Fairmont General Hospital. It belongs to the city of Fairmont. It's used by the people of the entire county and the area. It's like saying St. Mary's in Clarksburg was owned by an order of the Catholic Church, right? And is used by the people of Clarksburg and of Harrison County and of this area, right? I mean, there's no limitation because it's either governmental, city government, county government. Monongalia General is owned by Monongalia County, but is used by the city of Fairmont people and the county, right? It just means who is the owner. Now, what kind of town is Fairmont? In other words, if I were to ask you what kind of town is Berkeley, California, you'd probably say, or Chapel Hill, North Carolina, you'd probably say a university town, right? If I were to say Schenectady, New York, you might say a General Electric town. If I were to name certain white-collar towns, you might call them that way, okay? What would you call Fairmont in its essence? What kind of town is it? In its basic people makeup. What kind of people are most numerous?
Monroe.
Blue collar, too. You throw in Westinghouse, right? You throw in Owens. There is probably not a bigger blue-collar town in the United States. Would anyone quarrel with that? Really. There's very little unemployment. There's not high relief or welfare like there is in Kentucky or in the ghettos of big cities. It's very normal amounts, these things. You have a black population of maybe 4%. You have ethnic groups of every nationality. And your biggest thrust of people is of all these groups and the basic Anglo-Saxon white is a blue collar. Is that a fair statement? With not that many white collars, except for the few white collars at the factories, the mines, and because of the college, and things like that, right? But it's not as if you were to say, wait a minute. Oh, and Monongahela Power adds some more white collars because of the headquarters in here, right? But if you hit certain towns like Pittsburgh, you'd have to say, oh no, they got about 5 times the percentage of white collars that they have here. Why? Because Pittsburgh is full of white collar offices for the whole region. Don't you all agree? wholesale distribution, office distribution, insurance, companies with 600 and 800 girls on the whole floor, and this kind. We don't have anything like that. Isn't this basically a sort of high-wage, blue-collar town? Is that fair? Sort of a unionized, blue-collar town. Is that a fair characterization of it? Okay.
Unless you want to call it Monroe.
Monroe, okay. If you're meaning by the fact that we're a mix here. This is certainly not Mississippi, say, with an Anglo-Saxon population or and then say a big black population, two unique groups, or certain places in the West that's almost totally Anglo-Saxon and a small Mexican American. This is a very big ethnic groupings here of all types, right? I tried to indicate that, but you all know they're extremely large Italian American, Polish American, Slavic American, and similar ethnic groupings here, in addition to the basic Scotch-Irish, English, German, 10-generation old sort of typical Appalachian population. You then have about 3 or 4 generations of Southern and Eastern European immigration and about 4% of black. Okay? Fair description sociologically. You with me so far? Now, let's see how this works. Got it? These guys, you were really slow. I don't know whether you're afraid of me or you're not telling what you really think. This guy over here suddenly says, where's the power? And it took about a half hour to get it out. The power might be where the money is. Finance. That took 30 minutes to get out of you guys. Then a little while later, she finally says, well, it's the companies and the unions, but she says you made a mistake because we were dealing with 1925. So she dropped the unions and said consolidated was the power here in 1925. You better believe it. There was no Westinghouse, nobody else. When they wanted to know what to do, they didn't ask the high sheriff. He called up Consolidate and found out what to do if you didn't already know what they wanted you to do, okay? And you better do what they want you to do, okay? That was some of you say, well, that's exaggerated. Things have changed by that. The best way to figure out how an establishment works is to study it where, like a laboratory. That's what you all go to school for. Except this is a laboratory, they don't teach you here. You have to study it, how it works, where it can be observed, and where it thinks it's really by itself. In other words, it's doing what it wants to do. It's not under pressure to change. Like Saul has had to recognize the UMWs. It can't do what it would like to do. What it showed it would like to do in 1925, okay, imprison people. And it's had to change accordingly. A whole generation of leadership is constantly living with it. But now and then you can usually find out is in certain areas of the community how it controls its education, how it controls its health care. You usually get clear insights into how our decisions are made. Okay, usually they're able to make those decisions the way they'd like to make them. And you can study it. So let's study this. Because this is still, as I told you to begin with, pretty much true of Morgantown, Fairmont, and Clarksburg. We can generalize about small town Appalachian establishments from the laboratory right around us. Each of these towns are about the same size. About 6 or 8 families own most of the downtown in each of these towns. There's really no free press, right? In each town, the morning, the state, the evening era have either been combined into one paper, like in Morgantown, or here into one paper pretending to be 2, with the front page changing and the second page changing. Or in Clarksburg, it never did have anything but a morning, the state, and the evening era. For a while, the merchants got so disgusted with the establishment running the Clarksburg paper that for about 15 years they supported the weekly newspaper just to tell them what was going on. I mean, they couldn't even find out in the daily newspaper. Don't you all remember that weekly they ran down there for the merchants all ran ads in the darn thing. It's just to get some little semblance of a capitalist free press, which they didn't have. These 3 towns are beauties in this respect, okay? That's despite the fact that Morgantown has the state university. The whole state university is up there, and it's that bad, okay? That's despite the fact that the whole area has a very wealthy coal industry. That's despite the fact that the outside interests have come in, like big factories, Westinghouse, Owens here, Union Carbide, Sterling Faucet or Rockwell up there, right, and different ownerships. They nevertheless, what I'm describing here, I still think is a pretty tight establishment. The downtowns are basically unimproved. 6 or 8 people own them. And for years, forget the malls a minute, how did they operate? The main principle was high rents and improve nothing. Improve nothing, okay? The town looks like hell in each case, okay? Now how do you do that? You remember, forget the malls a minute. Go back about 10, 15 years and look at the Morgantown. Montgomery Ward, manager, repeatedly, on behalf of the company, went to the owner, one of the 3 or 4 people that own downtown Morgantown, like each of these towns is owned in blocks. And they said they'd do anything to buy that property so they can improve it. Air conditioning, they didn't even have an air conditioning Montgomery, Ward store downtown. I'm not talking about the way the malls, destroyed the town. They would not only sell it to them, they wouldn't even give them a long-term enough lease to air condition another place. I mean, you can't air condition a whole 4, say, story building with that unless you get a long-term lease to, improve another guy's property that much. And what was the most you have? All over this town, the only thing that happens is 2 things are built in Fairmont. It's fast food things, filling stations, and banks. Nothing else is built. You notice that? The banks all built new buildings, right? They had facades, like Community Bank had a facade. You remember they came up, took the same old junky front, and they put a facade on it for about 5 years, just a front. Now they got a new building, right? Across the street, Standard's got a new building. Across on each side, a new bank, and City's sitting in its monstrous brown building down south. The only thing left is the biggest building of all still sitting there, right? In town with just driving windows. Okay. Then Middletown Mall is a offshoot of which? Community Bank. It's the same board, it's just a baby mall. Morgantown, same thing. Nice Fairmont, Farmers and Merchants, nice First National, right? Clarksburg, similar situation. Filling stations sometimes are in good shape, and fast food places sometimes in good shape. All these will last like Holiday Inn for about 6 years, and then they begin falling apart. Concrete block flaws in all of it. It's all built like junk, It's Israel about junk, usually, so everything's put together now in all these fast food. But this is what we got, okay? Now, how is this possible? That nobody cares enough about this town to do anything about, how is this possible? That you end up like this. That you end up with such a tight thing. Well, let's look at this. I keep forgetting I don't have a picture. Let's go back to Fairmont General Hospital as a case example. You say it belongs to the city of Fairmont, right? Now, the city of Fairmont has become fairly enlightened. A generation ago, they would not have elected, say, an Italian-American to the city board, would they? Now, an Italian-American can be elected fairly easily. Fair enough? Now let's take the Fairmont General Hospital Board of Directors. Do you think it reflects the city of Fairmont? Now, I want to throw one exception in here to what I'm going to tell you. Because of a tremendous outcry and attack on the hospital, there was a change made a number of years ago, which amends what I'm going to tell you in only one way, which I'll describe to you. Now I'm going to describe the Fairmont General Hospital Board. This is a $10 million hospital, and it has a board of directors that controls it and operates it. Very modern, fine, modern hospital. Modern operating rooms, only completed about 2 and a half years ago. Good delivery rooms, rather nice furnishings. Physical facility in every way, quite modern. At that time, cost $10 million. Most of the money, not put up by Fairmont, not put up by anything, put up by the federal government, Gilbert, HED, all Appalachian Regional Commission, these things. They're always big federal projects. Now, some problems up there, though. For instance, this very modern hospital is the only one we know of in the United States which has a coronary care unit. If you get a heart attack, you go to a very modern coronary care unit. but it does not have an electrocardiogram department. You all intelligent people, so I'm not losing. In other words, if you came in with chest pain, say in the daytime, in any other hospital in the United States, your doctor would simply, like he orders from the laboratory, the x-ray, he'd order from an EKG department, take an EKG on this person. Everywhere but Fairmont General Hospital. No EKG department. Okay? There's an EKG machine sitting up there in the emergency room. That's because there was such protests over this policy. That's available in the emergency room only. Okay? No EKG technician. Just a machine sitting there. No EKG department. We'll talk about why. For about 10 years, the only group practice around here, Fairmont Clinic, could bring in anyone from Dr. Koppel, professor of medicine at West Virginia University, board certified in medicine, a world famous hematologist. The hospital would just reject them for privileges, delay them for privileges, keep them waiting. Dr. Hunter waited 10 months to get the right to walk into the hospital. Okay? But if you were the right kind of guy, not connected with a group practice, you walked in the morning, you met everybody, shook hands, and I knew you were admitting patients. Okay? I'm just describing. How could it happen in a city-owned hospital with such policies? Okay? So let's look and see who makes the decisions. Who is on the board and who always has been on the board? Fairmont General Hospital. Some simple rules I want to give them to you. Not afraid you're writing them down because they're right there in the history of the hospital. Who has a seat on the board of Fairmont General Hospital? Anybody want to guess first?
The Dawsons worked for years.
Who?
Dawson.
Yeah. Hold it a minute. Dollisons. The Dollisons. Anybody know their business connection? What are they connected with?
Box Bank.
The Box Bank. A local Fairmont industry. The Dollisons. The Dollisons, let's start with them. Well, if you're a Dollison, you get a seat on the board. When your father dies, then the son gets a seat on the board. I assume when he dies, then his son gets a seat. The Dollison gets a seat on the board. Rule 1. Consolidation Coal, Mountaineer Division, gets a seat on the board. When one guy steps down, another guy steps in. They get a seat on the board. Monongahela Power Company gets a seat on the board. One man steps down, another Monongahela. They ask to come through. Okay? You thought it was, you thought it was owned by the city of Fairmont, huh? City of Fairmont has given up the ownership, you thought, to the private interest. Oh, no, this is city-owned hospital, because then it doesn't pay city taxes. It doesn't even pay for its light bill. It doesn't pay for police service. It doesn't pay for street service like you and I do. It's free of all, everything, right? Because it is dedicated to the city. But I'm describing who controls it, owns it, and sets its policy. Consolidation, Monongahela Power, Dollison, Hardesties. You ever heard of that name? Very big name. Well, that's one way to look at it. What's another way to look at Hardesties?
Vice President.
Thank you. Vice President of Continental Law is another way to look at it. In other words, that's a way to call it move your chessmen twice. Yes, the Hardesties are very big and they're very prominent here. And Howard Hardesty was a very prominent lawyer and a state tax commissioner, but he is today Vice President of Continental Oil in New York City.
George is King.
Huh?
George is in Oil King.
Right. But very big, okay? We're talking about where's the power, okay? Chuck Brown. Chuck Brown is not just Brown Lumber Company. What else does Chuck Brown do for a living? What's he own? King Knob. Now you're talking. Okay, big stripping operations, right? He runs some of it through Consol. Sometimes he fronts the Consol. Sometimes he delivers Consol tipples. And sometimes he strips and goes through the Union. And sometimes he strips and runs around the Union. Chuck will play it anywhere, right? And am I wrong about that? I mean, you all, again, I told you, Cap, in your home can scratch you much more than the tiger in India, because the tiger in India is dangerous, but it's 20,000 miles away. It can't get to you. See, and when you talk about the people we're talking about here, they're up very close. They don't like you when you talk about it, because they're not supposed to be talked about. What else do you notice about this? Why they might be uptight? Even if you've never been around people with money, do you think people are more relaxed, say like Rockefellers and Kennedys, by the time it's fourth generation money or third generation money than when it's first generation money? Which do you think is more dangerous? The guy who overnight becomes a millionaire, or the guy who's gotten accustomed to it? Maybe there's no difference. Maybe money always corrupts. That's another answer. Which way do you want to jump on it? Anybody want to have an opinion?
The first generation.
Is a little more dangerous? Okay. How much real wealth have we got around here that stayed here? Do we have much of it? Like the Browns, you know, I mean, he's just made it probably in his lifetime, I would assume. I don't know where he came from, but these Pike County guys in Kentucky, I think, are very dangerous, you know. In other words, 107 millionaires, poor, impoverished, Pike County, Kentucky. And some of them were working miners, born and raised. Their daddies were miners, and they were miners. Just like they didn't have a dollar to their name last year, and they're a millionaire today due to the coal rush. I would say a guy like that with 16-carat diamond ring on this finger and a fortune when the camera closed up on 60 Minutes. These are guys that really got to show off their wealth. They're liable to do some dangerous things. You know? Now look at our power structure here in town. They got another rule. I'm going to assert the rule because they won't assert it. I've said it to them because I've had some meetings with Lord Claremont down at the hospital. One of them was one that began at midnight, I remember, during the crisis we had in this town about 8 years ago when we were settling a few issues. We've been sort of shoved far enough so we were telling them off for the first time in their lives. We've never been told off. Well, one of them is, how is it possible that Dawson, listen to the names again, let me roll them on my tongue, because, you know, in a town like this, electronic systems controls was not organized by Dawson or Smith or Jones. It was a poor miner's son named Mike Basile that organized, electronic system control. And some of the smartest, sharpest, handiest, shiftiest, cleverest businessmen in town also have names that end in a vowel sometimes. Huh? Anthony Sorrell knows how to operate around this town. He knows how to run some good business. Make a buck in different fields and all. Okay? But I'm going to roll over my tongue once more. We're going to go back over in Fairmont, West Virginia, the board of the hospital. Dollison, Hardesty, that's families. Okay? Brown. Now institutions. And they always appoint people by the name of Davis, Withridge, and so forth. Monongahela Power, Consolidation Coal. Then we have Critchfield. What's the famous law firm down here? What is it? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, never mind. Yeah, they used to have jokes about law firms with names like that, but that's the name of the law firm anyway. Right? Critchfield, Webb, etc. Okay. They're in there too. Okay? That's who runs the hospital. Now, what's the rules? Well, the first rules is as follows. They were adopted by Fairmont Field Club. Now, what's Fairmont Field Club? Because you can't talk about Fairmont without understanding Fairmont Field Club. I started with the hospital, but the Fairmont Field Club ought to be out that window. Fairmont Field Club, what would you say the building's worth? Let's talk about the buildings. The building worth 45, 55, the building without the land. We know the land could be turned into a building. The building isn't much, is it? It's a sort of rambling old frame structure, right? Lakeview Country Club is worth probably $4.5 million, okay? Those of you that have been over there. It's a real prime institution, okay, outside of Morgantown. Fairmont Field Club is prime and valuable only because of its land, wouldn't you say? Because of the country club estates and what's thrown up around it. But Sometimes you don't want to be fooled. You might say, well, I think I'd rather belong to Green Acres. Yeah, but let's get the rules straight first. How Green Acres got established, how things happened in this town. Fairmont Field Club was laid out in the period we're talking about, before 1925. There were certain rules installed, and the Watsons, who owned it, and that mansion down on 7th Street. Don't give any mistake just because there's a license tag in this town. It used to have J.E.W. on it, and think that the poor guy was Jewish, because that didn't mean that. That meant J.E. Watson. And he always put his initials on his license tag. And J.E. Watson was the last member of the legislature who was from that, wealthy family of Watsons that owned the South. Now, they had certain rules, these people. They believed in their rules. They brought the foreigners over to be cheap labor, or basically to be a cheap labor source to keep people in line, and then as necessary to break strikes. They brought the blacks for similar reasons, cheap labor or break strikes. And they had certain rules. When you form a country club then, it's about the attitude that you'd have in the main office of the company on these matters. What were the rules? Well, first of all, if you form a country club, there's two classes of people you keep out right away. You keep out Jews and niggers. Okay, that's rule one. Second thing to do, you pass a rule in Fairmont to deal with Fairmont. Fairmont is a tricky town. So the Fairmont Field Club had posted right next to the locker room the rules. You could bring a guest in, okay, and they didn't care who your guest was one time. They pulled this rule down, but it's still the rules, and I'll tell you the exceptions, okay? That nobody could belong to the club who himself or his wife was at least 1/8 of the following nationalities, whose ancestors came from Italy, Portugal, Spain, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Turkey, Macedonia, Montenegro, Czech, Slovakia, Lithuania, Croatia. I used to know it all anyway. It's in the deed of my house. I ought to know. It tells who I can't sell the damn place to. It depends on the street you live in around here. I'm not allowed to sell it to anybody who's 1/8 of any of those things. Now the problem is the Supreme Court has ruled on this, and you no longer could enforce that. You follow me? In other words, it's in the deed. All this garbage is repeated. You follow me? When you buy the house, but it isn't enforceable. You get the point. The courts would not prevent it. Now, you take a name like Urban down, south of here, or Urbanik is a very common, almost like Smith in Polish, okay? Cecil Urbanik was a coal miner who then became a UNW officer. Now, Cecil Urbanik was a very popular ball player. He was also a professional ball player. He went to college. He was a miner's son. But because he could get football and baseball scholarships, he was captain, he went to the University of Kentucky and then became a professional ball player. Then he worked in the mines, and then he was popular. He became a union officer. And he probably got some big ideas through his head. That's what happens with guys when they go off to war, or they get out of the county, or they get funny ideas in their head. When he came back, they were opening up Fairmont Farms, which we all call Fairmont Farms. Fairmont Farms consists of a bunch of older houses of the Watsons. That was the Watson estate. So that little house right where the posts are as you pull in behind the First Baptist Church, that was the gatehouse. The gatekeeper was there to keep you, he kept you from entering on their property. Then different people had houses in the place. That's what these Spanish tile roofs are. So some of them are out of the 1910s, the 1900s. See, the Fairmont Farms estate. Coming from the stable house, you thought the nursing home on Walnut Avenue, nursing home was a nursing home. That was the stable house of the Watson estate, coming down from the big building and then in through their estate. See? These early houses were out there. But they were beginning to develop it and sell out these others. So around 40, more or less years in there. 41, something like that. I can't remember the year. Some people may remember. Cecil got big-headed, you might say, as the Watsons would say. He got a big notion in his head that while he was selling it off, he'd buy New Mexico. But this was a very tricky deal. He thought this was World War I and fight for freedom and all. All he wanted was a piece of the action out in Fairmont Farms, but his name was Urbanic. He had to do just like a black man that they joke about and all the family and all this stuff. He had to go get him an Anglo to go buy the land. You see, go deed it to him. When he went to trade with them, all these are all gone, see, so we love this everyone, they're all gone. This is what they tell, jokes about the way they play with the civil rights movement, And he had to go get him an Anglo, with an Anglo-Saxon name, to buy the property. He was a friend of his. You see the deed to him. That's the only way. That's Maxie. That's World War II has started already. Okay, the fight for freedom. Now, has all this got nothing to do with how an establishment makes decisions? I don't think so. I think it's got a lot to do with how Fairmont operates today. Watch it. The Fairmont Field Club now ain't messing with Italians, Slovaks, all these southern Eastern Europeans, no Polacks, nothing of this that fills up Grandtown and ruining Barrickville and causing a decline in values all over Shinston, etc. In fact, when I got into this country, one of the funniest things that happened to me was I didn't know what FIFA meant. And I used to go calling down in Shinston a lot. It's about 20 years ago. And I got a funny notion in my head. I always used to think that if they talked enough about people, it was a very prominent thing. So I come back one day and I told my wife, oh, there's a very prominent thing in Shinston. I'm going to bump into one of these days. They must own a lot of the towns that everybody talks about. They're the Talleys, T-A-L-L-E-Y. That's how bright I was, you see. And I was waiting to meet the Talley man, you see. This is the way, you see, the establishment was thinking about the Fairmont Field Fund. What they were doing was designing these rules to deal with what they thought was a problem. All of these mongrel races, as you say, that come in here that were ruining Fairmont, okay? Therefore, all the main portions of West Fairmont, outside of Fairmont Field Club, way off, down to 7th Street, 8th Street, all those developments had, if you buy property in there, you'll see into the deeds, all the same thing. Now, why did I tell you all? Because Fairmont General Hospital belongs to the city of Fairmont. But you have no more to do with it. You just pay taxes here if you live in Fairmont. The rules of Fairmont Field Club govern Fairmont General Hospital. You understand? Now, what are those rules? Now, I said all this has to be amended. Even Fairmont Field Club has to be amended because you heard of the token Negro. They've taken in their token 2 Italians now, haven't they? As far as I know, guys like me have been telling this tale for about, and my good friend Jim Knowles, who was on the inside, the vice president of Consol, who in his last years became a very good friend of mine, and he gave me a lot of the insider information that I gained, about the community. Because he had lived through it all. He knew it all from the inside. And Mr. Knowles, who is the father of John Knowles, the famous novelist, the author of A Separate Peace, and a best-selling author who was raised here in Fairmont, Jim Knowles was an engineer and an official at Consol and knew all these things about how they busted in, did all these things. And in his last years, he was a very enlightened man in retirement and a banker down at Community Bank and Trust. And we used to talk endlessly and be together a great deal and have a lot in common. And he told me the story of how they handled the first Italian guy's application at Fairmont Field Club. Jim was in the Field Club. He said the first thing they did was he was chairman of the admissions committee. They made him chairman. Because Jim was an Anglo, an English Catholic, see. That they pushed him right in front. See, they had a Catholic get him right up in front, okay? Then it was Anthony Dattilo. Anthony Dattilo was a millionaire. He could buy and sell his town, actually. Okay? Now, what could you do? You couldn't argue that Anthony Tiller wasn't a good golf player. You couldn't argue that Anthony Tiller was controversial, or that he was pro-union, or he was anything. Anthony Tiller was just a nice guy, you know. He didn't make it. He wasn't all that bright. He didn't scare him with his brilliance. Nothing. You follow me? He had the money, and didn't he? I think from his father or something. And he went ahead with it, and just kept it invested. So how did they do? Well, Jim Knowles voted his minute. This was 1930. Yeah, 1930. Young Anthony DeTillo must be 65 now. How old is Anthony? Something like that. See, I told you, it's very dangerous stuff. We're talking about a cat in our own town, right? He got claws like the tiger in India is far away, never going to hurt him. So Jim says he voted for him. The other two voted against him. He said, Jim, you go tell that. And he says, I didn't. I never told him that I voted for him. See, I was sent to deliver the message. You got to remember, that takes real brain something. You got to remember, you got to think of the principles and the character that takes, right? People that can do that, they're capable of bringing fascism to the country, or concentration camps, or anything, because that takes a level of mean sophistication, that goes beyond the norms of just kid stuff, alternatives, Because remember, you're dealing with a guy worth maybe not $1 million. I mean, I'm saying today, I'd say Anthony's $1 million. Okay? I don't know what he'd be worth then. There's no foreign national that's worth a lot, but I don't know what dollars. Now, what's that got to do? It's got a great deal. That's the fact that the city of Fairmont has given over the management of its principal institution of hundreds of employees, Fairmont General Hospital, to be run by the rules of Fairmont Field Club. So there are no Italians, no Slovaks, no Jews, no Negroes. Wait a minute. We didn't even begin with the human race. No women and no working people. Very important. I want to quit talking about ethnics for a while. Let's talk about something. Do women belong on a hospital board? Well, I would think so. They're not only half the human race, but I think we got some very enlightened women. Let me give you some examples of people I don't always agree with. In this town, we have a millionaire, a very wealthy woman named Thelma Shaw. Very enlightened, very knowledgeable, very up on health care, chairman of a governor's nursing commission, national chairman of the Episcopal Church's Commission on Health Matters. My God. She's a prophet all over the world except in Fairmont. Of course, she can't even make it onto the hospital board because of her sex. Okay? Fairmont's a blue-collar town. Maybe you all have forgotten. There used to be headlines in the newspaper here. Marion County Federation of Labor on behalf of 30 local unions. That was Westinghouse, everything else but the mine. Demand seat on hospital board. Answer of hospital board. We would love to do this, but we cannot. Because it is not possible to put anybody on the board who might deal with himself. And the unions negotiate health care plans, and they might therefore be dealing with themselves. And you've got to be mean and very sophisticated enough to do that when your name is Hardesty and you sit on that hospital board. And somebody said, I thought a few minutes ago, that Hardesty was connected with the insurance business. And can you guess who holds all of the tens of thousands of dollars of insurance money in business of Fairmont General Hospital? Does anyone think it's Smith Agency? Does anyone doubt that it's the Hardesty Agency? Has anyone ever heard of it being put out to bid? Has anyone ever dealt at arm's length for that business? Now, suppose you put an addition onto that building. Where do you think that contractor goes? I wonder why he doesn't go down to Bowers to buy the property. I wonder why that contractor doesn't go over to Lowe's if they were here. I wonder why he doesn't go out to Reevesville, pick it up at a good plane mill. Wonder why he goes down to Brown Lumber Company to buy all of his local parts on $10 million worth of construction that he doesn't contract. No, he doesn't get delivered right from the public steel. You see what I mean by sophisticated meanness? You've got to be a crook that makes the Watergate thing look like bananas. I mean, Watergate's just big crookedness, and we're looking at local crookedness, right? We don't want to always act like it's always Watergate. It wasn't Nixon mean, it wasn't at all mean. We got it right here in our backyard. And look at a public institution like this, okay? First of all, the answer is a fraud because the workers do bargain their insurance, but what's that got to do with it? They're not insurance companies, right? So does the company. You mean the man from Mountaineer Coal ought to be barred from the board? You mean the man from Paramount Box Company should be barred from the board because he might deal with an insurance company for the fringe benefits of his employees? It's no answer at all, you see. Now I said, how has this been amended? Very clever. When they came under drastic and violent criticism of being a branch of Paramount Field Club where they used to meet. When the clinic first began, when I first began blasting this, they used to meet at Paramount Field Club till I, hit them with it about 5 or 6 times, and they quit meeting there. And that was just proving the point. The Paramount Field Club rules were in effect because the whole group belonged to Paramount Field Club. They just met in the place anyway. Then they changed the rules. And they said, since the city owned the hospital, they would allow the city. Right? The city owns the hospital and has given its control over to this self-perpetuating board. When one of them died, the rest of them picked a new job. See what I mean? They gave the control away. All you got to do is by ordinance take it back, you see, but they won't do it. So they decided to have a deal whereby they would allow the city, allow them to appoint 2 people to the board. One of each party. And so for the first time, like the token Italian or half Italian that got into Paramount Field Club, you got a guy named what's his name? Queer, the city director of water.
Griffith.
Griffith. Not a Queer. Griffith. Yeah. You got a Griff on the board. I don't think he attended, for a while there, but he was on. You got a chance through the city appointment, you call them, of getting 2 of the city directors, you say, could go on. Now, I just simply suggest to you, how are decisions made? Now let's take the school issue. You don't see it at the hospital because that's a city thing. Let me give you my prejudice to you of what in the leadership of education has been moved. For about 10 or 12 years on school improvements, I think what the leadership of the establishment, whoever makes the rules, whoever's in charge, their attitude of hostility to country people has been so deathly in the past, so deadly, that now it's become distorted, like around the bond issue, like this last one, because in my book, or in my view, it should have passed, okay? In the past, I must try to explain, for those of you that don't know their past history, the attitude of the people in control of Paramount and of the school board was so hostile and recognized as such by the people in the outlying areas that their return hostility was to do the only thing they knew how, to keep their bond issues. And that was the history of the past. At one point, I had long discussions with the leadership of them to try to explain, look at your priorities. You remember the first bond issue here was about 10 years ago. It got defeated. I said, look at your first school. It's right in town. Your second school is right in town. They didn't amend it till I think the 3rd vote to put the schools, to show that they would do what they did, like with Meadowdale or something, to put one of them out a little way, They were really going to just grab it all off, like for Paramount West and so forth, and for town. Now that they've gotten over that stage, they're still desperately distrusted and they don't answer charges that are made against them. For instance, in the western part of this county, whether it's true or false, a great many people believe the rumor that the school board had already wheeled and dealed with a particular individual to buy the land so that he would make a huge profit to place the building. And they knew that. But that rumor was wild, absolutely killing the school on the issue here. A month ago, it was already all over, from the, let's say, from Barrettville west, that whole area, and probably affected the vote in all the country yet. They could have put an ad in the paper stating that under no circumstances would they deal with the gentleman who was chairman of this commission or that, or whoever he was, that was a named person. The name was very plain and named, And the person being a well-known wheeler dealer, it was important that they do this, to separate themselves from it. It was either true, right? There's only two ways to look at it. It was either true, and they had wheeled and dealed, okay? Or they were the biggest jackasses who ever lived, because the rumor was out everywhere, and they had to answer it. There was no use not putting your head in the sand, was there? As far as I'm concerned, I told Mr. Alvarez, it's his business. He wrote a letter to the editor and then got about 50 anonymous calls from people who told him this, I don't put the burden on those ignorant people, Those people, in effect, are people without education. And the leadership, the intelligent leadership, did nothing, didn't lift its finger to either state it was a lie, or if it was true, they deserved to get down to the feet if they played a dirty game like this. That if trade-off already existed to put it in a certain spot so somebody would make a fortune, and put it there. Because that shouldn't exist in a bond issue either. Now, I'm not saying the rumor's true. I just don't know. I do know that they're capable of doing this in the past. In other words, as long as you've got public institutions that don't put up to bid, that have people doing business with themselves for the public's money, that bar people because of their ethnic background, or because of their race or their color. There were people. You remember they tried to raise $1.25 million of $10 million locally, you remember, by payroll deduction? And much of the same kind of thing was said during that thing. In other words, the controversial issues, I remember I attended meetings, arose then. That, I ain't giving a goddamn thing to that hospital. When they, take for instance, I gave you the EKG issue, let me tell you why it exists as an issue. Let me explain it to you effectively. Why doesn't Fairmont General Hospital own an EKG department? Every other hospital does. Go to Morgantown. Go to Clarksburg. Forget about the United States of America. Just assume this area, okay? It's unheard of not to have a lab, X-ray, EKG department, physical therapy, etc. They're all departments, right? Suppose in the morning you were a rich doctor, you had a lot of money to invest, you bought 50 farms, now you want to do something different. Either in Morgan County practicing, you go into Montague General, or down at United Hospital Center in Clarksburg, you say, look, tomorrow morning there's a new portable X-ray machine out, Mr. Administrator. I'm going to buy it for $100,000. It's made of aluminum. I'm going to strap it on my back every morning, and I'm going to bring it in here, and I'm going to photograph my own patients. I want that. You think you'd get away with it? You believe any administrator would let you walk into the building, shoot private X-rays? Think about it a minute. You'd say, wait a minute. The standards in X-ray are set by this hospital. The hospital owns the X-ray machine, You're not bringing it in, doctor. You're not bringing in a piece of laboratory, run laboratory tests. We set the standards here. We protect the public interest. We decide the model of the machine. We're making sure it's modern. It's correct, okay? You got the trick picture? The doctor would get rich doing that, but he wouldn't be allowed to do it. I'm giving you a parallel. What's an EKG machine? How does it work at Paramount? Each doctor carries himself a little portable EKG. Okay? So there's like 15 EKG machines in the hospital. Yeah, 15. I don't know the exact number. Okay. You understand, surgeons don't have them. Just certain kinds of doctors that read EKGs. Now, how does an EKG fee work? Let's say, for round numbers, that an EKG fee is $20. Okay? The doctor gets $10 for reading it in a hospital normally, and the hospital gets $10 for doing it. Just like an X-ray consists of both the film and the doctor interpretation or reading of it. You with me? They comprise the fee together. Okay? And what's the story in Fairmont? As simple as this. Those, say, 10 doctors have told the administrator, we want to make the money. We're going to do our own EKGs. And we're going to charge the whole $20. Got it? And he knows better, because every other administrator knows better. He would like to, on behalf of the hospital operating department, right? But he gives in to this pressure because we're back where we started from. Those doctors belong to Fairmont Field Club, and they meet with his board socially and drink with his board and associate with his board, and he's outflanked before he can do anything. So by this point, it's too old. The 20 years he's given in to him, by now he's the spokesman. He will tell him, you doctor, I'm sorry, the reason we can't have an EKG machine is, it's a good idea, let a lot of machines be around. What's the problem? One of those machines is about a 1928 model. What's another problem? One of those doctors holds an EKG upside down when he reads it. I've seen doctors walk over and have to turn it on. He don't even know how to read an EKG, let alone. It's just almost criminal neglect of the patient. Okay? Going on. Why shouldn't we let them bring in second-hand X-ray machines and shoot film, even though it might all be a big fuzzy gray, that you couldn't, that anyone would say was lousy? As some of the machines, needles are off. Some of the machines, electronics are off. In other words, there's no standard. You're not protected the way you should be. A laboratory, an X-ray, EKG, anything, you should be protected, right? What we got here, you understand sometimes something is very small, but it's an inkling of the truth on bigger issues. This little issue tells you, you don't have statesmen on that board deciding what's best for Fairmont, what's best for Marion County. They're looking out for what's best for them or for their friends, That's not a good idea in public institutions. That's not a good, wise policy on school boards. It's not a good, wise policy on hospitals. But it's where you learn what power is. Okay? Now, I've talked way too much, but I'd like some of you to take me on these, because I've warned you this was controversial material and that it was prejudiced in the sense that I have studied it. I've tried to be open, but I've made up my mind, and I've given you what are decidedly editorial viewpoints here, okay? That's my view of the world. I'd like for some of you all to, come out with other ones, criticize it, or to amend it or modify it. I'm saying that sometimes we get an inkling of power by the way in which it's exercised in places where there's no light shed on it. Where there's not a lot of light shed on it. This is the way they really would like to act. In other words, it's sad, but in 1975 that the Fairmont Field Club operates substantially by those rules, with a couple of exceptions. You all correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's only a couple of exceptions. That the hospital doesn't even make exceptions to the extent that they can elect directors. They just keep off all women, all blacks, all ethnic groups, all Jews. You name it, they don't like them, okay? This is sad, isn't it? And this is poisonous. And this is destructive of the unity of... In other words, how do we know what a little Polish miner feels like in Barrackville when he gets a chance to vote against the school bond issue, if that's the way they run the hospital? You follow me? How do you know the responses of people? It's never the way it seems to be. It's sometimes selfish. He doesn't want to pay taxes, right? Or he doesn't have children. We know those viewpoints, okay? Sometimes, unless a system, especially capitalism, free enterprise, unless we're open about it, unless we keep an open system, the way you get a revolt against a dictatorship is sideways. The people don't tell you what they're really thinking. You follow me? They vote you down the only chance they get. And this is very dangerous, because it votes down good things sometimes, you see? And that's what I'm trying to bring out. If these things are open, if there's an open society of honorableness, of decency, to where an Italian American, a Polish American, a black man, a woman can have the same opportunity to rise, to be elected to office, to come to power, to run a business, to do whatever, then you don't have resentments at the different levels that are created by these kind of splits. I say there's a sickness in a society in which today's business leadership in charge of Consol doesn't break with that past dramatic. You follow me? If something wrong when oil companies take over, I've given them 6 years. I haven't rushed them, not 6 months or 6 weeks. By now, they know what's going on in Fairmont, About time they said something. About time they knocked it into line. Because I'm not accusing Consol of any of these things. Consol does promote Italian Americans, at the superintendent level. Island Creek has a Monongah Italian American guy as president of the company. I know in their own operations they don't do it. But this disease has affected the decision-making processes of this community. And I'm saying to you simply that in studying the establishment, it is worse than the ethnic issue. It's the denial of rights to blue-collar people. It's the attitudes of the East Side people towards Fairmont Farms and Fairmont West. That's sick in this community. They are right. I live on West Side. I live the third house up from the high school, but they are right. The snobbery in charge of Fairmont West High School towards blue-collar people, towards black kids, I know because my boy went there. I know because I live there. I know their attitudes. I know because they sometimes tell them to me. They think they're sharing with me their attitudes, and I know how they think and how they feel. They really look down on the working class kids from the East Side. They regard themselves as better off because they're within 3 blocks of Fairmont Farms. And that attitude stinks in a principal, you follow me, of a high school, whether it was Malcolm or the present guy, okay? It's the whole subservience, the whole attitude of fear with which they treat those rich kids that drive in from Fairmont Farms. Ask one of those kids one day. It took you, I watched you went around that block, down 8, up and down Mount Vernon, and cruised up Outlook and circled 3 times. And I believe you lived just over there, I named the house you mentioned. I said, you're only about 2 1/4 blocks from your house, and you've driven about, 14, 16 blocks here to get you. And to have a principal, though, treating these kids as if they're better, you follow me? The kids who cause the trouble are the blue-collar kids. The kids who cause the trouble are the miners' kids. The kids who cause the trouble up in farming. You want to know the truth? I live the third house up. One that Farmington's been coming in there now, okay, right? The trouble's in the morning. If there's something stolen, it's in the morning. If there's something done wrong, it's in the morning, okay? In the afternoon, when the Fairmont Farmington kids come in, they ain't no trouble to anybody in that block, That's the truth, but that's not the attitude of the people in charge. You understand what I mean? It's an anti-rural attitude. Like Farmington kids, they already have made up their mind they're lower than dirt. You follow me? I know that one. That's from Wolf Hollow. They know who they are, Actually, you're doing them a disservice. Maybe her brother was a farmer. But this kid may be a good kid, And yet they've made up their minds about it. Who wants to shoot at somebody? I've zinged off in a lot of directions, but we've been very close to the cat, not the tiger.
What was that article the other day in the paper with reference back to your daily embarrassment, full daily embarrassment? That little article in the front section was Reader's Right or something like that.
I may have missed it, tell me.
A couple of weeks ago, there was something with reference to the X-ray machine up here at Fairmont General Hospital. There was a question.
I think the question was, is it true? The person, it was a tricky answer. The person said, does Fairmont General Hospital, is it true that Fairmont General Hospital does not have an EKG machine? Okay? They said, we called Mr. Ovieres, the administrator, and then they said what he said. They do have an EKG machine. It is located in the emergency room. It's a totally evasive answer. Now, an honest answer would have been, it is true that after 17 years of criticism, we bought an EKG machine and guaranteed our doctors it will not compete with their machines by limiting it to having no operator. Is there someone who can correct me if I'm wrong? It has no operator, no EKG department, no staff, and it sits there so that if you walk into the emergency room nurse can be told by the doctor at home to give it. Is that a correct statement? That's the way I understand it. You can order the nurse in the emergency room to do it. I'm talking about an EKG department that would go up on the floors and do the x-rays. For instance, suppose you're laying in a room, you had appendicitis, you had your appendix removed, you get chest pain. Do you realize they have to make a decision unless they bring a private EKG machine to you, like the clinic keeps one up there, the clinic doctors? Otherwise, they're private. They belong to each of the doctors personally. They have to make a decision, and some people enter the coronary care unit without ever having had an EKG. That's how common it is. That's almost unheard of.
They don't always have monitors.
Huh?
They don't always have monitors.
They don't always.
Have monitors for everything.
Tell us what you mean by that, because you're a nurse.
Well, we had a friend, for a common person, who was admitted 2 weeks ago in chest pain, and 2 days later they said he had coronary, but there was no monitor to put on him that night, so they didn't send him to West Virginia University for.
You're meaning there aren't monitors for each
Patient.
bed in the coronary care unit. There's only, 6 monitors or a certain number of monitors in the CCU. I don't know the exact number. Is that right?
Right. So he didn't get.
Well, that's a
monitor.
further refinement of this issue. But the substantial issue is a decent administration, and I'm not criticizing Mr. Ayers or Mr. Staples, or any administrator. It's tough enough to be an administrator. I'm simply saying this. No one should deny this principle, that in the morning, any modern hospital administrator would order everybody, including the clinic, to get their EKGs out and buy, say, 3 EKG machines, set up about 3 technicians, and a round-the-clock EKG service. That would be the way a decent hospital. That's the way every hospital we know of, accredited by the Joint Commission on Accreditation, operates.
How can they get accreditation if they don't have that part?
Because the accreditation is not as good as it ought to be. In other words, sometimes the accreditation, like they were given a trial accreditation 1 year, they had very serious fire hazards. They had very serious other things. They try not to discredit a hospital if they can possibly get by. Tell you another thing they do. Many people think accreditation should be much stiffer. Just before the accreditation team comes through, they post notices. Accreditation team coming. The doctors' names are listed. One doctor was listed, like Dr. Hamilton, 107 charts behind in dictation. That's probably like 6 months. He hasn't dictated in. How does he remember what he did 6 months ago? What kind of dictation is that going to be at that stage? 107 charts were listed on one doctor before. Now, when the team gets there, everybody's caught up. You follow me? It's the old Army system, right? They know the Inspector General's coming. Everybody's correct. My point is, they should ask for the files of the posted bulletin board notices, including like that. That should be enough to lose accreditation. The fact that a month ago you had a guy with 100. Where's your chart review committee? Where's anything that would let anybody get that far behind? Well, these guys couldn't operate in their mind. These are mind management men. If they would have fallen behind a federal law like that, probably they'd have you shut down and strapped. We're not trying to strap doctors. This is administration at fault, really. It's the structure of leadership that's at fault. The board's at fault. They should be able to say to a doctor, look, doctor, call in Hamilton, wherever he is, Smith, anyone who does it, okay? Anyone at the clinic should lose his privilege. We'll give you ever do this again, you're going to lose your privilege. You'll lose them for a month, Well, you won't be able to admit anybody. They shouldn't fool around with an issue like that.
You use the term group practice. Well,
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that. What does that mean?
In
And
medicine,
how does it compare with?
yeah, all right, in medicine, most American medical practice is solo practice. That means just like a guy in his own airplane flying solo alone you have a doctor out alone. Fairmont is typical. Most of Fairmont consists of solo practitioners. On, what's the exceptions? You have a couple of EMT men together. You did have a couple of eye men together, they just split up and went solo, the two eye men in town. I'm talking about the town generally, okay? On 7th Street, you have 3 men together and a 4th man renting from it. Used to be 40. Do you remember? See what I mean? That's the closest thing to a small group in one specialty. You'd call that a small, single specialty group. 3 men practicing, same specialty. In Morgantown, you have 2 single specialty groups, 2 obstetrical groups of obstetricians, I think 3 in one group and 4 in the other. You know, they take care of their patients, okay, all in the same specialty. What I mean by group practice is there's a growing trend since the Mayo brothers, since Charlie and Will Mayo formed Mayo Clinic in the 1880s, away from solo practice and towards doctors being in a group. This means that physicians practice together, share their knowledge together, use one common record room, you know, one pool of stenographers dictating into one chart. So no matter which doctor you've seen, all of your x-rays, all of your lab work, everything's in front of them. Right now, people get fragmented. Sort of the doctors don't know, like you've just had a chest x-ray with Dr. So-and-so, now you got a pain in your back, he sends you so-and-so. He orders a chest x-ray, a back x-ray, does your blood work over. It's already over in this guy's chart. He doesn't know it. See, you sort of get repetitious work done. They don't always know what's been done. Group practice is a growing phenomenon. It's doctors practicing as a group. The only example of that we have around in this area are Wheeling Clinic, Fairmont Clinic, Myers Clinic, Golden Clinic. In the northern part of West Virginia, these are the examples of it. If you are a local person, you think of your doctor as being a solo doctor. But it depends on where you're raised. If you were raised in the Dakotas, or in Iowa, or in Minnesota, or in Wisconsin, you wouldn't think a doctor was odd for joining a group, or in Tucson, Arizona. You'd be very suspicious if he hung out his shingle, like Dr. Smith. Everyone in town would say, he must be a drunk. He didn't join one of the groups, see? Around here, it's all a prejudice, you see? It's the opposite way. There must be something wrong with that doctor. He joined the group. They think you should be a businessman. Doctors who join a group usually say, I don't want to sit and collect bills. I don't want to worry about collections. You know, I trained to be a scientist and to take care of sick people. So I don't want to worry about all these details of business and collections. I just want to, you know, be part of an ongoing scientific thing and keep up with things. Is that a short enough answer?
Well, when the Medicare program starts, you know, everybody that pays their insurance through Social Security was included, but of course it just took care of people that need skilled nursing. I remember, you know, how the health department was giving money to start this, and of course they didn't get started in Fairmont, and nobody had access to pay their insurance that couldn't get care until they started. Okay, we have a patient that was in need of skilled nursing services, and she just heard about the program through the paper and asked for us to come in. And we went in and she was to get B12 once a week, and the doctor was so upset it was free to her. So all she had to do was bought her vial of B12, which was about $1.80 then, and got all her injections. So he was so upset at us giving care. So he went once a week and got $100 out of the bottle.
No, what you're meaning is he charged
He
for a
charged
visit.
$10 a visit. He hadn't seen that woman for 2 or 3 years, and she was desperate for help. And once we went in to give her care, then he charged for a home visit and gave her B12 out of the bottle.
There's been a lot of abuse in medications.
But
You know,
now
it
she
isn't
was
the
eligible,
principle of that,
and
it's the way the doctor.
she needed the care and could have got it free
Yeah.
with our service coming up.
Anyone want to make any other points? Anyone want to disagree? Because I wish some of you would dissent. I hate for you to think that you agree with my terribly prejudiced view of the establishment without any dissenters.
We talked about these hostilities.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any change in thinking as far as, I'm talking now Continental
Yeah.
as an example,
Yeah.
or U.S. envelope, or any of the
Let me say, I don't know. I wish I knew. I came to know the Eastern management because they were good enough to invite me to attend their management sessions when they had them at Lakeview Country Club. Eastern management used to have like breakfasts, several days to fight and argue about a lot of public issues, and they bring in guys like me that might not have agreed with the company, that could dissent from the president. The president of the company would be sitting there and all their officials. I came to know them enough to know that they were trying to open up in a very honest way, and Eastern is the biggest underground mining company in the state, I believe, the most employees, and they're not owned by any oil company or any other company. They're a coal company, except for barges, barge lines, and the Boston Gas Company. But their coal operations are dominant. So Eastern, I know, is struggling as an honest management, or was then, to try to make their men think. In other words, if you've never thought for yourself, then say a guy like me comes on so strong, you're liable to think, well, he's radical as the devil or something. If you come to know somebody, you begin to realize the values they hold, and what is central to them, and you realize that it's just different viewpoints people hold that you have to open yourself up to. And they were trying to do this. They were saying to their men, in effect, if you can't think for yourself, we're going to have disasters just like Farmington. I mean, we're going to face them in our own country. Don't let's think that's been solved, That's anybody's problem. That can happen to anyone that isn't thinking, that isn't listening to criticism from below or from anywhere, That we must, as an industry, be open to criticism and respond to it intelligently. Not be wild and say it's all radical, or it's all coming from a union or something like that. I wish I knew the answer to your question. Consol and Continental obviously trouble me the most because they're the biggest. Bethlehem has never troubled me much, very honestly, for this reason. They don't think much, but their heart's been in the right place. I've got to say that. That's my instincts, that they sort of, without talking much, have really respected getting lower production per man and put safety a little ahead. And I know Consol's record has improved enormously. I'm more interested in their thinking about community issues.
Well, this is
And that disturbs me because I don't know anything in Texas that's that good. You follow me? I don't like the idea that Texas Oil has probably bought and sold everybody from John Connolly to, to the governors and senators for years down there. I don't think it mattered whether it was Richard Nixon or Lyndon Johnson. I think Texas Oil money, probably was in on both sides and just ran the show. So I don't have that much hope that Texas Oil educated them. And when they make Howard Hardesty their vice president in charge of New York, why, I'm wondering whether this mentality is moving into New York or whether we're going to get some more enlightened mentality down here. I don't know which. I don't mean that New York mentality is better. I mean in that I don't know. And I'd like to get different mentalities in here, a different outlook. What do you think? How many of you think you see changes? Do you think you see changes in modern coal management that we didn't see before? Do any of you have opinions? Is there I do see some younger guys, around that maybe are getting more authority to think, but are they just college educated or are they thoughtful as well? I don't know. Any of you have views of this? Meet them?
Just a college education, but not much. One of the things that I just wondered what the opinion of the group would be. West Virginia is the leading coal mining state. You've got Eastern, you've got Consol, that's what we mentioned. This has been projected in their direction in Charleston, wherever, to open what we've got here, theory classroom. Develop several seams schools where you get the learning of coal mining underground as a student to prepare for the industry. I talked to Eastern people about this, talked to Consol people, and they look the other way. It's nuts. So what you really need here in West Virginia, truth, is an education for the up and coming coal miner that will learn mine safety, will learn how to operate that machine. And these are things that Hillball and Wilson and others spoke here. And this would not cost anything, would be a write-off. Now, if this attitude was put forth, and I thought Eastern might, but Levi Goldston, I understand, is dead now. He might have been one that survived the idea. He's no longer. And I don't know that anyone in Eastern feels this way. But this is very important. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Classroom, we get 4 hours of bookwork, studying gases, mind maps, ventilation, whatever, then going underground and qualifying then for the mining industry.
Well, don't you think the future has to go in this direction? Isn't the machinery more and more getting more sophisticated? And don't you have to have men that are going to be thinking about liquefaction, gasification of coal, all these things? It isn't all going to be done.
Well, there's a promotion going on right now in the Fairmont State College for this, and the community college, in 2-year associate degree courses in different phases of mining and stuff.
That'll
Probably will be a help. But the reason I asked the question is because I attended a meeting in Houston not too long ago. And this is one of the things that they seem to really speak out on, was the importance of the social level, social conditions of the individual. They seem to see this trend begin to change. And they realize that the fact that there had to be something to hold the people together, and these were some of the things we could probably do it.
Well, anybody want to, like the Quaker, have the last word before we break the peace? Who would like to speak because they can tell to? If not, why, you're a very good group, and I'm sorry we didn't give you a 10-minute break in the middle here. Next week, we're going to get on to the energy situation, and the week after that, we've got the president of the West Virginia Surface Mining Association, and the final week about the economics and future coal. Do you have an announcement to make besides what's on the board, Ray? Is that the law up there?
Right.
Okay. The papers are due next Monday, so any of you that have to get them in, why, please deliver. Thank you.